Alyssa couldn't believe her eyes. The moment she confronted Victor about her parents, his icy composure shattered, revealing the truth she never wanted to know. The man she trusted had orchestrated everything, pulling the strings that left her family in ruins. Just as her world crumbled, a final, devastating blow was about to land. One that would push Alyssa to the edge of despair.
Hi, welcome to True Tales Authentic Emotions. I'm Emma Blake, here to share a captivating story with you. Enjoy the journey.
Alyssa's voice trembled as she faced Victor, the man who had once held her entire world together. Now, with her green eyes blazing with a mix of anger and sorrow, she demanded answers about her parents' deaths. Victor's cold, calculating demeanor faltered for the first time, revealing a crack in his usually impenetrable armor. As Victor began to speak, the truth spilled out in fragmented, bitter sentences. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Alyssa's, not with the authority she had grown accustomed to, but with a twisted form of regret. Every word he uttered tore at the foundations of Alyssa's reality, unraveling the life she thought she knew. The weight of Victor's confession was almost too much for Alyssa to bear. Her hands clenched into fists as the full scope of his betrayal sank in. She felt a surge of despair, knowing that the man she had trusted had orchestrated the very tragedy that had shattered her family. The room seemed to close in around her as the tension reached a boiling point. In a final desperate attempt to maintain control, Victor's voice grew harsher, his silver-gray hair catching the light as he leaned forward. He offered Alyssa a chilling ultimatum, one that left her reeling. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, and Alyssa now stood at the precipice of a decision that could change everything. Alyssa sits quietly in her room, the evening light casting long shadows across the walls. Her green eyes are fixed on the floor, deep in thought as she revisits the chaotic events that led her here. Each memory, each encounter plays out in her mind like scenes from a distant past, but the pain is still fresh. She knows she must gather the strength to move forward, to face whatever comes next. As Alyssa sifts through the memories, small details begin to surface, details she hadn't fully grasped before. A particular word, a fleeting glance, the tone of a voice, all start to form a clearer picture in her mind. It's as if the pieces of a puzzle are slowly falling into place, revealing something she hadn't seen before. Just as a sense of understanding begins to dawn on her, there's a soft knock at the door. Startled, Alyssa hesitates before answering. When she opens the door, she finds Samantha standing there, a warm smile on her face. Samantha's unexpected visit brings a glimmer of hope back into Alyssa's heart, a small but significant reminder that she's not as alone as she feels. Alyssa stands in the middle of her room, her mind swirling with the weight of the choice before her. Her green eyes are clouded with doubt, and her hands tremble slightly as she contemplates giving up. She knows that walking away would mean abandoning everything she has fought for, but the fear of continuing feels just as overwhelming. The room feels smaller, almost suffocating, as the gravity of her decision presses down on her. Alyssa closes her eyes, taking a deep breath, and tries to envision a life without the struggle. A part of her yearns for peace, for the simplicity of letting go, but something inside her resists. There is a small, persistent voice that refuses to be silenced, reminding her of the strength she's already shown, of the battles she's already won. It's this voice that keeps her from surrendering completely. In the silence of her thoughts, Alyssa feels the familiar tug of determination. She realizes that no matter how impossible the road ahead may seem, she cannot quit now. With a newfound resolve, she opens her eyes, her expression hardening with the decision to fight on, even if the odds are against her. She knows the battle is far from over, but she also knows she won't face it lying down. Victor Carrington, with his piercing blue eyes filled with cold calculation, sits behind his polished desk, finalizing the details of his plan to utterly ruin Alyssa. His expression is one of controlled power, exuding confidence that his scheme will leave her with nothing. He presses a button on his phone, instructing his legal team to execute the last phase of the attack. This is his final move, and he knows it could be devastating for Alyssa. Alyssa, unaware of Victor's latest plot, stands with Samantha Mitchell in a quiet corner of the office. Samantha's warm brown eyes, usually full of empathy, now avoid Alyssa's gaze. Samantha struggles to find the words to tell Alyssa that she can no longer support her. The once strong bond between them feels frayed, and Alyssa can sense the distance growing. Samantha, though pained, steps away, leaving Alyssa standing alone, her last ally now gone. Richard Lawson, the family lawyer, meets Alyssa in the hallway. His sharp blue eyes, usually calm and thoughtful, are filled with regret as he explains that Victor's new legal actions have left him no choice but to withdraw his services. The blow is heavy, and Alyssa's heart sinks. As Richard walks away, Alyssa feels the walls closing in on her. Alone, and without support, the situation now seems utterly hopeless. Alyssa's shoulders slump under the weight of this new reality, and for the first time, she feels truly defeated. Alyssa, still reeling from the loss of her allies, finds herself in an increasingly desperate situation. Her heart sinks as she receives a message from Marcus Carrington, who she once trusted. The words reveal his betrayal, a deal he struck with his father, Victor, in exchange for Alyssa's downfall. Alyssa's eyes widen with disbelief, her grip on the phone tightening as the reality of the situation crashes down on her. Marcus, who had shown signs of understanding, had been playing a double game all along. Overwhelmed by the weight of this new betrayal, Alyssa seeks solace with Evelyn Carrington, hoping for at least a shred of support from someone in the family. But Evelyn's piercing blue eyes, once filled with subtle warmth, now regard Alyssa with cold indifference. Evelyn admits that she had always been loyal to Victor, and despite any personal feelings, she cannot go against him. The sting of betrayal from Evelyn cuts deep, leaving Alyssa feeling utterly isolated. Alone and without options, Alyssa paces in her apartment, her thoughts spiraling into a vortex of despair. The room feels smaller with each step, the walls closing in as her mind races through the hopelessness of her situation. She stares at the window, but even the outside world offers no escape. The burden is too much. She has lost everything, and now, at her breaking point, she realizes there is nowhere left to turn. Alyssa sits quietly in her dimly lit apartment, her mind racing. She recalls a moment from weeks ago when Victor mentioned a seemingly insignificant detail during one of their heated arguments. At the time, it seemed like a distraction, but now, in the midst of her despair, it clicks. Alyssa's expression shifts from confusion to realization as she begins to connect the dots. What Victor had said wasn't random. It was a clue. She feels a mix of frustration and hope as she starts piecing together these forgotten hints. A flashback takes her to a scene in Victor's office. Alyssa remembers Victor's cold smile as he casually pointed out an old painting on his wall. At the time, she dismissed it as irrelevant, but now, she realizes that the painting, with its hidden symbol, was more than just decor. It was a subtle warning, a part of the game he was playing. The memory sends a chill down her spine as she recognizes the depth of his manipulation. Another memory surfaces, this time, a conversation with Samantha. Alyssa had been too focused on the bigger picture to notice the urgency in Samantha's voice when she mentioned a legal document that Richard had shown her. It seemed unimportant then, but now, Alyssa understands that the document was crucial. Samantha's concern was a signal Alyssa missed in her frantic efforts to stay afloat. The regret is palpable, yet it fuels Alyssa's determination to dig deeper. Alyssa feels the weight of desperation as she decides to reach out to Richard Lawson, a powerful family lawyer who once worked for her parents. She hopes that his influence and connections could help her navigate the increasingly hostile environment Victor has created. However, when she finally meets with him, Richard's expression is cold and detached. His response is swift and cutting. He refuses to get involved. He has his own interests to protect and doesn't want to be dragged into what he sees as a losing battle. Alyssa's hope shatters as she realizes she's truly alone in this fight. The rejection leaves Alyssa feeling defeated, but she refuses to give up. She tries to formulate a new plan, seeking out other potential allies. Yet, every door she knocks on is slammed shut. People who once supported her are now too afraid or too self-interested to offer any help. The resistance she faces is overwhelming, and each rejection chips away at her resolve. Alyssa's frustration grows as she realizes that her resources, both financial and emotional, are rapidly dwindling. Exhausted and disheartened, Alyssa returns to her small apartment. The once modest space now feels suffocating as the reality of her situation closes in. She sits on the edge of her bed, head in her hands, grappling with the fear that she may not be able to fight this battle alone. The shadows in the room seem to grow darker, mirroring the hopelessness that threatens to consume her. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of determination remains, refusing to be extinguished. Alyssa's world shifts when she stumbles upon an old letter hidden in a drawer, written by her late mother, Elizabeth Monroe. The letter reveals a shocking truth. Victor Carrington is not only her adoptive father, but also the orchestrator of the financial downfall that led to her parents' deaths. This revelation sends a shockwave through Alyssa, causing her to question everything she thought she knew. The weight of this secret is unbearable, turning her grief into a burning desire for justice. The newfound knowledge that Victor is directly responsible for her family's ruin doesn't bring Alyssa relief. Instead, it complicates her situation even further. She now understands the depth of Victor's betrayal, realizing that he manipulated her life from the very beginning. This revelation fuels her determination, but it also makes the path ahead seem even more daunting. How can she confront a man with such power when her resources are nearly depleted? As Alyssa processes this revelation, the pressure mounts. The burden of knowing Victor's role in her family's destruction adds to her already overwhelming sense of despair. She feels trapped in a web of lies and deceit, with no clear way out. The walls seem to close in on her as she realizes that exposing Victor might destroy her as well, but she knows she cannot let this secret go unchallenged. The struggle between seeking justice and self-preservation begins to tear at her resolve. Alyssa sits alone in a darkened room, the only light coming from a dim lamp on a nearby table. She stares blankly at the floor, her eyes red from tears that refuse to fall anymore. The weight of her revelations and the realization that Victor's power extends far beyond what she imagined leaves her feeling utterly hopeless. For the first time, Alyssa contemplates giving up, her spirit crushed under the enormity of her situation. The silence in the room is almost deafening, amplifying the gravity of Alyssa's despair. She pulls her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them as if trying to hold herself together. The thought of facing Victor now seems impossible, and she begins to believe that any effort to fight back would be futile. Her mind is filled with the possibility that there might be no escape, no justice, and no relief from this nightmare. Alyssa's gaze shifts to the letter lying crumpled on the table, the damning evidence of Victor's betrayal. The more she thinks about it, the more she feels trapped, with no clear path forward. The once burning desire for justice is now overshadowed by a paralyzing fear. She questions whether she has the strength to continue or if it's time to accept defeat, allowing Victor to win without a fight. Alyssa receives devastating news that her closest friend, Samantha, has passed away unexpectedly. The shock is palpable, and she clutches the phone tightly, her knuckles turning white. The loss strikes her deeply, tearing away one of the few sources of support she had left. As the reality of Samantha's death sinks in, Alyssa's world seems to collapse around her. The connection they shared was more than friendship. It was a lifeline that now feels cruelly severed. Flashbacks flood Alyssa's mind, replaying moments of laughter, comfort, and shared struggles with Samantha. Each memory is a painful reminder of what she has lost. The emotional weight of these memories is almost unbearable, and Alyssa feels the sharp sting of loneliness creeping in. The montage of these moments highlights the depth of their bond, making the loss all the more tragic. In the aftermath, Alyssa is left with a profound sense of emptiness. The room around her feels colder, the silence more oppressive. She stares at a photo of Samantha, the pain in her heart almost too much to bear. The grief is overwhelming, and Alyssa feels as though a part of her has died with her friend. This loss shakes her to her core, leaving her questioning if she can continue fighting at all. Alyssa, having mustered every ounce of strength, begins to execute her carefully laid out plan. Just when it seems like everything is finally aligning, she encounters an unexpected obstacle that she could never have anticipated. The company she was counting on to secure a major financial backing abruptly withdraws its support, citing unforeseen issues. This setback is devastating, as it threatens to unravel all the progress she has made, leaving her efforts teetering on the brink of collapse. As Alyssa desperately searches for alternatives, the weight of the setback begins to take its toll. Doubt creeps in, and she finds herself questioning whether she has the resilience to push forward. The realization that she might have to start over from scratch is almost too much to bear. Yet, despite the overwhelming pressure, there's a flicker of determination in her eyes, an unwillingness to let go of the future she has fought so hard to build. The scene reaches its climax when Alyssa receives a call that changes everything. The voice on the other end delivers news that forces her to make an impossible choice, one that could either save her or lead to even greater disaster. The uncertainty leaves the situation hanging by a thread, creating a tension so thick that it leaves the audience anxiously awaiting what will happen next. Alyssa, determined not to let the recent setback defeat her, turns to an unexpected ally, Samantha, a social worker she met during her struggles on the streets. Samantha's resourcefulness and unconventional thinking become the foundation of a new plan. As they sit together, brainstorming ideas, the tension slowly begins to ease, replaced by a cautious hope. Alyssa listens intently as Samantha outlines a strategy that, while risky, holds the potential to turn the tide in their favor. The next phase involves meticulous preparation. Alyssa and Samantha spend hours drafting proposals, making phone calls, and gathering support. The atmosphere is a blend of concentration and quiet determination. They work tirelessly, leaving no detail overlooked, aware that this might be their last chance. The weight of the situation is palpable, yet there's a renewed sense of purpose driving them forward. As the plan begins to take shape, Alyssa feels a flicker of hope reigniting within her. She knows the risks are high, and failure could mean the end of everything she's fought for, but the possibility of success is enough to keep her going. The scene closes on Alyssa's contemplative face, her eyes reflecting both the hope and the caution that now guide her every move. Alyssa, still processing the enormity of her situation, is surprised when Marcus Carrington, Victor's son, approaches her with an unexpected offer of help. Marcus, with his calm and calculated demeanor, presents a solution that, on the surface, seems like the perfect answer to her problems. His presence is both reassuring and unsettling, as Alyssa knows that Marcus has always been an enigma, someone who keeps his true intentions hidden. Marcus proposes a complex financial maneuver that could potentially save Alyssa from her current predicament. His plan is intricately detailed, leaving little room for error. However, as he explains the steps involved, Alyssa senses that this path is fraught with risk. The potential consequences are severe, and the more she considers it, the more the weight of the decision presses on her. As they continue discussing the plan, the tension between them becomes palpable. Alyssa struggles to discern whether Marcus genuinely wants to help her, or if there's a deeper, more self-serving motive behind his offer. The stakes are incredibly high, and Alyssa knows that accepting his help could either be her salvation or her downfall. The scene closes with Alyssa staring intently at Marcus, her mind racing with doubt and uncertainty. Alone in her room, Alyssa feels the weight of her situation closing in. She starts to question every decision she's made up to this point, doubting her ability to navigate the treacherous waters she's found herself in. Her mind races with memories of past failures and insecurities, each one adding to the overwhelming sense of doubt that threatens to consume her. As the night deepens, Alyssa's internal monologue becomes more intense. She reflects on how she got here, wondering if she truly has the strength to face what lies ahead. Her thoughts reveal fears she has never voiced before. Fears of not being good enough, of failing those who depend on her, and of being swallowed by the very world she's trying to conquer. These thoughts gnaw at her confidence, leaving her feeling vulnerable and exposed. Despite the darkness that surrounds her, a small spark of determination flickers within Alyssa. She knows she can't afford to give in to these doubts, but the battle inside her mind is fierce. The audience sees her struggle, her vulnerability, and it creates a deep emotional connection as they realize the immense pressure she's under. The scene ends with Alyssa sitting silently, her face a mix of fear and fragile resolve, as she contemplates her next move. Victor, with his piercing blue eyes gleaming with cold calculation, decides it's time to make his move against Alyssa. He knows that to crush her spirit, he must strike where it hurts the most. With a meticulously crafted plan, he leverages his vast influence to orchestrate a series of setbacks that threaten to dismantle everything Alyssa has built. As the pieces fall into place, he watches with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he's put her in an almost impossible situation. The confrontation between Victor and Alyssa is as tense as it is inevitable. Victor's presence is overpowering, his voice calm yet laced with menace as he reveals his intentions. Alyssa, though determined, feels the full weight of his power bearing down on her. The realization dawns that she's up against a force far more formidable than she anticipated. The fear she tries to hide seeps into her eyes, and the audience is left wondering how she will navigate this seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Alyssa's shock gives way to a steely resolve as she stands her ground, refusing to be intimidated by Victor's tactics. But the reality of the situation is clear. She's dealing with an adversary who will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. As she processes the gravity of what Victor is capable of, a new layer of fear grips her, yet she remains resolute, determined not to let him see her falter. Alyssa's worst fears are realized when she discovers that Victor has managed to freeze her accounts, cutting off her access to the funds she desperately needs. Her heart sinks as she stares at the cold, unyielding message on the screen, realizing that everything she's worked for could vanish in an instant. The enormity of the situation presses down on her, making the challenge she faces seem insurmountable. The impact of this loss hits hard. Alyssa is forced to sell her most cherished possessions, things that not only hold financial value but also deep sentimental meaning. Each item sold feels like a piece of her soul being torn away, leaving her feeling more vulnerable and exposed. The once confident woman is now grappling with the harsh reality of losing everything she holds dear. Alyssa's resolve is tested as she adjusts to this new, stripped-down existence. No longer able to rely on the comforts she once had, she must find strength in the midst of this devastating loss. The physical and emotional toll is palpable, but deep within her, a spark of determination remains. She knows that giving up is not an option, even as the world seems to crumble around her. Alyssa feels the weight of the world pressing down on her as those around her begin to question her every decision. Richard, her family lawyer, sternly advises her to reconsider her choices, his tone carrying an unspoken warning. His sharp blue eyes bore into hers, and the tension in the room is palpable. Alyssa, feeling cornered, struggles to maintain her composure, but the doubt begins to creep in, gnawing at her confidence. Victor's manipulative influence extends further, as he subtly turns her family against her. Evelyn, who once seemed a distant figure, now appears cold and judgmental, her striking blue eyes lacking the warmth they once held. The words Evelyn chooses are cutting, filled with disdain and disappointment, making Alyssa feel increasingly isolated. The pressure to conform to their expectations is suffocating, and Alyssa begins to question whether she can continue on her chosen path. Even Samantha, Alyssa's closest friend, starts to waver in her support. During a heated discussion, Sam's warm brown eyes reveal a flicker of doubt, and her normally empathetic tone takes on a more critical edge. The bond that once gave Alyssa strength now feels fragile, threatening to break under the strain. This growing divide leaves Alyssa feeling more alone than ever, her resolve weakening under the relentless pressure. Alyssa decides to take matters into her own hands, determined to solve the escalating issues on her own terms. She arranges a secret meeting with an influential contact, hoping that this risky move will turn the tide in her favor. However, as the conversation unfolds, it becomes clear that she has underestimated the complexities of the situation. The contact's demeanor shifts, revealing hidden agendas that Alyssa hadn't anticipated. The realization that she's been misled hits her hard, shaking her confidence and leaving her more vulnerable than before. As Alyssa walks away from the meeting, her mind races, replaying the conversation and the subtle threats that were laced within it. She thought she had found a solution, but instead, she has stumbled into a deeper web of deceit. The implications of this misstep begin to sink in, and Alyssa starts to understand that her problems are far from over. In fact, they are just beginning, and the consequences of her actions are already spiraling beyond her control. Back at home, Alyssa tries to regroup, but the weight of her mistake presses heavily on her. The atmosphere around her grows darker as she contemplates the next steps. Her initial confidence is replaced by a gnawing fear that she may have made things worse, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. The sense of impending doom looms large, and Alyssa realizes that she is now entangled in a situation that is far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Alyssa, with fierce determination in her eyes, attempts to resolve her problem by confronting one of the key figures involved. She believes that by forcefully addressing the issue head-on, she can quickly put an end to the chaos that has engulfed her life. However, as she presents her case with unwavering confidence, the response she receives is cold and dismissive. The figure she confronts remains unyielding, his demeanor more intimidating than she anticipated. Her bold attempt to take control of the situation backfires, leaving her feeling defeated and small in the presence of such formidable opposition. As Alyssa processes the failure of her approach, she tries to regroup and think of alternative strategies. Her mind races through different possibilities, but each one seems more desperate than the last. The resolve she had just moments ago begins to waver as the reality of her situation settles in. Her initial plan, though seemingly simple and straightforward, has only led to further complications. Alyssa's heart sinks as she realizes that her problems have only grown more tangled and difficult to navigate. Alyssa returns to her home, the weight of her failure heavy on her shoulders. The atmosphere is thick with tension as she contemplates her next move. Despite her earlier resolve, she now feels the crushing burden of her failed attempt and the spiraling consequences that have ensued. Her determination is still there, but now it's laced with doubt and fear. She understands that the road ahead is far more treacherous than she had imagined, and the solution she so desperately seeks seems more elusive than ever. Alyssa sits alone in her modest apartment, the weight of her current predicament heavy on her shoulders. As she stares out the window, lost in thought, memories of how she arrived at this point begin to flood her mind. Flashbacks reveal a time when life was simpler, when she had a promising career and the support of her parents. But the loss of her parents in a tragic accident shattered her world. The once bright and ambitious woman began to spiral, her grief leading to a series of poor decisions. She took risks that didn't pay off, and the financial strain compounded her emotional turmoil. The sense of security she once knew vanished, replaced by a relentless struggle for survival. The scene shifts to a memory of Alyssa standing in front of her family home, a place filled with warmth and love, now sold to cover debts she had accumulated in her desperate attempt to hold on to a semblance of her past life. The loss of her home was the final blow, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a deep sense of failure. This memory lingers, highlighting the stark contrast between the life she once had and the harsh reality she faces now. As she recalls these moments, Alyssa's expression shifts from one of sorrow to a quiet determination. She knows she must find a way out of this dark chapter, but the path forward is unclear. Back in the present, Alyssa's thoughts return to her current situation. She reflects on the people who have come into her life recently, offering help and guidance. Some have been genuine, while others have had ulterior motives. Alyssa has learned to be cautious, to trust her instincts. Yet, despite everything, she clings to a glimmer of hope, a belief that she can reclaim her life. The flashbacks have revealed the layers of her story, showing the audience the depth of her struggle. But they also hint at the resilience within her, a strength that may just be enough to pull her through. Alyssa stood on the edge of the bridge, her heart racing as she looked down at the dark, swirling waters below. The cold wind whipped her hair around her face, mixing with the tears that streamed down her cheeks. The weight of all her failures, the loss of her family, and the betrayal of those she once trusted had brought her to this moment of utter despair. She felt completely alone, her mind clouded with thoughts of hopelessness. She gripped the railing tightly, her knuckles white, as she took a deep, shaky breath, contemplating the final step. Just as she was about to let go, a voice called out her name. It was Sam, her social worker, running towards her with a look of urgency and fear. Alyssa froze, her heart pounding louder in her chest. Sam's voice was filled with emotion as she pleaded with Alyssa to step back, to reconsider. Sam reminded Alyssa of the strength she had shown through all her hardships, the resilience that had kept her going even when things seemed impossible. Alyssa hesitated, the sincerity and concern in Sam's voice breaking through her despair. Slowly, Alyssa stepped back from the edge, collapsing into Sam's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Sam held her tightly, whispering words of comfort and reassurance. It was in this moment of vulnerability that Alyssa felt a glimmer of hope. She realized that despite everything, she was not alone. With Sam's unwavering support and the promise of a new beginning, Alyssa found the courage to face her future. Together, they walked away from the bridge, Alyssa's steps unsteady but filled with a renewed sense of purpose and the faint light of hope guiding her forward.